The checkered, the colourful life of Michael Jackson. What do your fans within your club think about him out with the music that he created? Do they talk very much about him as a person?
Very much so. It's amazing. All the women fancy him, all the men idolise him, and obviously some of the men fancy him as well. But people are interested in him anytime he makes a public appearance. There was a few weeks ago, I suppose, in preparation for the This Is It concerts, he started to curl his hair again, a bit like the Michael Jackson we've come to know and love from the 80s and 90s. And it was all over the forums and all over the internet of the fans talking about how he looks and how it's great and how he's wearing the black hat and the surgical mask, and suddenly it's Michael Jackson, the performer, all out and all over again. And everyone was so excited, and not just about the music, not just about the concerts, but just about seeing him and knowing he's well and knowing that he's happy. And that's what people love about him, and I think that's what around the court case as well, you know, people weren't genuine. Obviously people were very concerned about the outcome, but more concerning was his health, because the fans genuinely cared about Michael Jackson as a person. And I think people have got to understand that his fans loved him for who he was and what he does, not using him. Because I think Michael Jackson touched his fans in many ways to make them feel so strongly about him. And he's added something great to all our lives.
Matt, let's bring in another guest here in the studio, Lucy O'Brien. She's the author of Madonna.
A life and death played out in public. The Michael Jackson story ends as it began, in controversy.
I have warned that the abuse of these medications were dangerous, and I have told everyone in this family that if one day Michael Jackson woke up dead, I would not be silent.
Tonight, we're dedicating much of the evening news to the sudden death of one of the world's most famous men, the shock of his fans and the unanswered questions about exactly what killed him.
And we celebrate his music, the soundtrack for a generation that inspired millions. Also tonight, beaten to death by her 15-year-old babysitter. He's found guilty of murder.
Good evening. His name and his music have been on the lips of millions around the world today. The sudden death of Michael Jackson has left both fans and critics shocked in equal measure.
At just 50 years old, his extraordinary life is over, but his extraordinary story goes on.
Tonight, we will be reporting how the world found out about the superstar's death.
We'll hear the tears and the tributes from fans and fellow stars.
We'll hear the man and his remarkable music.
And recall the eccentricities that turned him, in the public's mind, from Jacko to Wacko.
But first tonight, the drama surrounding Michael Jackson's final hours played out in front of the cameras like so much of his life. John Irvine reports from Los Angeles on the death of a legend.
On the West Country tonight, the Glastonbury Festival remembers Michael Jackson, who's died at the age of 50.
Michael Jackson's songs have always been around, and it's just weird. When we woke up this morning, someone saying, "Oh, he's dead."
I'm very sad about it, and you know, we lost the biggest star in the world, I think.
I'm live at Worthy Farm, where almost 200,000 music lovers share with us their thoughts on the King of Pop.
Hello, welcome to the programme. Away from Glastonbury, we have reports from across the region, looking at how the West Country is reacting to the news.
I was numb, just shocked, really. I mean, I spoke to him last week. I mean, he was on really good form. So confident, positive. I'm absolutely stunned by this.
We'll also have all the latest news from where we live on Fridays, the West Country tonight.
You're watching the West Country tonight.
Very good evening to you. In life and now in death, Michael Jackson has taken the world by storm. Highly charismatic and highly controversial. Today, whatever you thought of him, he was the topic of conversation across the West Country.
Thousands of people have been remembering the man known as the King of Pop, nowhere more so than at the Glastonbury Festival in Somerset.
Well, let's go live there now to our reporter Claire Manning, who's at Glastonbury. And Michael Jackson, not traditional Glastonbury territory, but what's been the reaction there to his death, Claire?
Well, Glastonbury Festival was in a bit of a bubble last night, really, Simon. While the rest of the world was being told what was happening, here, of course, no television screens meant we were fairly oblivious to what was happening. Rumours did start to circulate, though, but it was only really first thing this morning that it was confirmed that Michael Jackson had indeed died.
Was a delightful person. He was kind and gentle. I was listening to your commentator talking about the racial overtones. They certainly were not part of the Michael Jackson that I knew. And I think the world will be devastated by the loss of such a fine talent and a true gentleman.
As you were saying, Derek, you knew him since he was 18. How do you remember him as a person? Give us an example of how he was when you came into contact with him. As his promoter, you obviously must have worked quite closely with him.
Yes, indeed. I mean, he was just a nice young man. He was one of several brothers, Randy, Tito, Marlon, and Jackie were the other four of the Jackson, what was the Jackson Five that became the Jacksons. And he was just an excellent family member. He was kind, considerate. I'm not trying to paint a picture of him of anything more than what he was. He was just a nice young man, not particularly affected by...
The news.
The King of Pop, Michael Jackson, has died in hospital after a suspected heart attack. Reports from Los Angeles say the 50-year-old superstar wasn't breathing when paramedics arrived at his home. He was given intensive cardiac treatment in the ambulance as he was rushed to UCLA Medical Center, but he was in a deep coma and never regained consciousness. Jackson had been a star for 4 decades, since launching his career as a child singer with his brothers in the Jackson 5. He married Elvis Presley's only daughter, Lisa Marie, in 1994, but they divorced 2 years later. He then had 2 children with nurse Debbie Rowe, but they never lived together. He also had a 3rd child, reportedly by a surrogate mother. But he'd been living as a virtual recluse since being acquitted on child abuse charges in 2005. His solo hits included Billie Jean and Thriller. That album alone sold nearly 30 million copies worldwide. His lifetime record sales are approaching 750 million.
And we now rejoin our sister network, CNN USA.
Bad, you know, there's a balance between negative and positive, you know, so it's just like, although he had a lot of negative energy, you know, a lot of that negative energy was pointed towards him. I think that today is a day that everybody could just, you know.
I got to stop you, Levon. Thank you very much. We have to go back into the continuing coverage on the death. Thank you very much. I know this is a large crowd here that is still. I saw one woman in tears being told that Michael Jackson had died. Back to you.
All right, Richard, thanks very much. I want to bring in Roland Martin right now. Roland, I understand you just talked to his brother.
Yes, I talked to Marlon Jackson about 30 minutes ago, and he is absolutely devastated. He said that he was watching television. I'm sorry, he was at his home in Georgia. His daughter was downstairs, and she said, "Dad, they're saying that Uncle Mike is dead." And he says, "Wait a minute, that could not be." He said, "So, you know, let me just find out what's going on," because he said they were accustomed to all kinds of rumors.
Music icon and singer Michael Jackson has died after suffering a cardiac arrest. The 50-year-old singer wasn't breathing when paramedics arrived at his house after midday local time. He was pronounced dead in hospital 3 hours later. There have been tributes to the singer from politicians and fellow musicians. His show business friend Uri Geller said Jackson was a misunderstood and lonely man. But his hugely successful career was overshadowed by persistent allegations of child abuse and his often bizarre behavior. Rob Reynolds reports.
He was known as the king of pop, a dazzling entertainer with 13 #1 hits and 750 million albums sold. But Michael Jackson's life was a troubled one, from a childhood scarred from abuse by a brutish father to a string of scandals and a trial on child molestation charges. Now, Jackson is dead at the age of 50, the victim of a heart attack. Jackson collapsed at his home in Los Angeles, where he had been rehearsing for the past month, planning a comeback tour. The singer was not breathing when paramedics arrived and rushed him to UCLA Medical Center, a short distance away. He was given CPR, but when he arrived, he was already in a deep coma. As family rushed to his bedside, Jackson was pronounced dead. Michael Jackson started out as a child star more than 4 decades ago and went on to become one of the world's best-known stars. With hits like Thriller, Billie Jean, We Are the World, and many others, he won 13 Grammy Awards. Years of tabloid headlines centered on his prolific plastic surgery, sometimes bizarre behavior, and persistent rumors of sexual involvement with young boys. In 2005, Jackson was acquitted on child molestation charges and left the United States, becoming a virtual recluse in Bahrain. As news of his death was broadcast in urgent bulletins by the U.S. media, crowds gathered outside the hospital where Jackson died. Just a few of his millions of fans bidding farewell to an entertainer who thrilled the world. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera.
Died young before his time. We could say he is going to become a legend. He is already a legend. You had the chance to meet him, to work with him. Tell us more again about those experiences of working with this figure who has now entered the history books.
Michael was a perfectionist. It was never perfect. You know, I was too young to be able to work with Elvis, but I worked with Michael, and I remember working with him on establishing his European tour, being with him, listening to demos of some of the songs. And Michael was very perfectionist. He was asking lots of questions about his public, lots of questions about the radio, the television, what the kids were dancing, were listening to in terms of music. But at the same time, he was trying to mark the years with his own steps. You know, if I may express myself like this. And he was trying to create his own style. So he was very...
On to entertainment news. Michael Jackson, the former child star who went on to become the king of pop, has died at the age of 50. Los Angeles coroners told NHK that the singer was pronounced dead in hospital on Thursday afternoon. He was rushed to hospital after he was found not breathing in his home in Los Angeles. The cause of death is not yet known. The hospital has not made any official confirmation on Jackson's death. Tearful fans are gathering at the hospital, offering prayers. Michael Jackson held his first concert in Japan in September 1987 after his Thriller album became a huge hit. When he arrived at Narita Airport near Tokyo, he was greeted by crowds of fans eager to get a glimpse of the world superstar. About 40,000 people attended his first concert, and 700 security staff were mobilized at the Tokyo venue. Michael Jackson was loved by many. May he rest in peace. And that concludes this edition of Newsline. I'm Catherine Kobayashi in Tokyo. Thanks for joining us.